Hi, in this video I'm going to be telling you what I consider to be the best first lens after your kit lens. Join me, roll credits. Well, hi YouTube, Brian James at m43 guy with you once again, and welcome to beautiful Hadrian's Wall country here in Cumbria. It's a nice sunny day for a change. Yesterday it was snowing, and today we're sitting around about the 16-17 degrees, so this doesn't know what it wants to be weather-wise. But today I'm going to be taking you through a question which I'm asked an awful lot by people. What really makes the best first lens to buy after your kit lens? That's an interesting question, and I'm going to go against what I've suggested for many years, and I'll tell you for why as we go through this video, so keep watching to the end. Now, most of us get a camera these days, whether it's a Micro Four Thirds, an APS-C or a full frame camera, and we get usually with a kit lens on it, and that usually covers a standard sort of focal lengths. If you're buying something like a Micro Four Thirds, you're probably getting a 14 to 42mm. If you're getting something on the APS-C, you're probably getting around about an 18 to 55mm, and that's to do with the crop size of the sensor. This video, although it's primarily around the Micro Four Thirds size of things, is actually open to all the rest of the formats as well, so you might have to do a little bit of a conversion, but the recommendation I'm going to be giving is based on the idea of what it takes photographs of, not necessarily the formats. So I'm going to be referring to Micro Four Thirds sizes here, but again, to get this to a full frame you would just literally double the focal lengths that I'm talking about. APS-C, you're talking about 1 to 6 or 1 to 5 ratio, so if you work it out on that, you'll be able to get a good idea. So what is the best second lens to buy? Well, I've always said for many years that the best lens to buy isn't another zoom. You've got your basic zoom lens. The kit zooms are fantastic these days. They work really well. So my recommendation has been to take a prime lens. Now, when I first started photography many years ago, my first camera came with a prime lens. You didn't tend to get zooms. Zooms were expensive and also didn't have the range that they have today. So the current range of kit lenses that you get actually are very good. But my suggestion has always been, up until this time, the 50mm lens on the full frame. Now that equates to a 25mm on Micro Four Thirds, but it's what you used to call the nifty 50. They're inexpensive, they're a great focal length, they're a fast lens, and they're really useful. And I'm going away from that. I'm going to tell you why in a few moments. But let's concentrate on the nifty 50 or the 25mm on the Micro Four Thirds and see why it's been the choice for many years. Well, first of all, the f-stop you can take your kit lens down to. If you can get down to f3.5 with the lens fully open, you're doing well. Usually sitting around about f4 to 5.6 on them. Now that's okay. It's a usable lens for somebody starting, but it's not very usable in low light. And to be able to get something which is low light, you need a more open aperture. Now that costs, that's expensive. But the beauty of the small lens, the standard lens, the nifty 50, as I'll keep on probably referring to it, but on the Micro Four Thirds, I've got my little Lumix 25mm f1.7, that's the equivalent. So the 25mm is the standard lens. And with 1.7 it gives you a great ability to get low light conditions without having to push the ISO up too much. It gives you the ability to have a slightly faster shutter speed in lower light conditions as well, so you don't get so much camera shake and it's a bit easier to use. The beauty of this 25mm though is that it gives a very similar field of view to what the human eye gets. And that's always been the great recommendation. It gives you a very similar field of view. It doesn't create any distortions necessarily any different to what you would have with your own eyes. So it's a very comforting sort of view. It's what you'd expect. And this has been the staple lens that I've suggested for many years. So the 25mm lens is good because it does follow that same sort of field of view. But I've changed my view over the years because this used to be the thing I would recommend. It was inexpensive. It was very good for learning photography. It's a great lens to actually make you move your feet a little bit more and understand how you compose photographs. But one thing I did discover as I've been going through the years is they never quite seemed right. When I had a photograph in my mind taken on a 50mm lens, although it was supposed to match the field of view of my eyes, it never really did. And so I realised that when I actually look at something, I don't just look at it as I'm looking at the camera here. I tend to have my peripheral vision. I don't keep my head still, so I'm looking all around. So what I actually see when I'm taking a photograph isn't just what I've got in my field of view now, but what I'm actually seeing in my mind is either side, and I get a much bigger view. And that caused me to realise that, in actual fact, for a first lens for me, would still be a prime, It would still be a fast lens, but would be best to something like the 17mm or the 20mm lens. Now of course the 17mm is going to give somewhere around about a 34mm full frame equivalent. The 20mm is going to give something like a 40. It's a little bit wider, but it's not creating big distortions. It does change it a little bit. And when I'm on about distortions, I'm on about the fact that you're trying to cram a wider piece of viewpoint into the same sort of thing that you would normally have. So because compressing everything into there, what we tend to get is something which is closer to the lens becomes extremely large. You'll see my finger there. As it gets further away from the lens, it's smaller. And that works the same when you've got things like people's faces in. As they get things like noses and the face itself, you tend to get slight distortions on it. As we get extreme, as I've said on other videos, you'll tend to get some real big differences on that. It also causes problems to a degree when you've got something which has got parallel lines, where you've got verticals. If you are looking up at a building, you'll tend to find that you get convergence on that, and it becomes more pronounced on a wider lens. But what I have found is the 17 to 20mm lens range on this gives a very pleasing distortion. It's not particularly bad, and it's something that we've got quite used to, especially using mobile phones now. It's usable, and if you don't get something too close to the lens, it doesn't have that big problem. But what it does do is it gives a little bit more of a pleasing image, I find, for when you're taking something like a landscape shot or buildings. Now I'm not going to tell you which lens to use, that's down to your personal choice, but I would suggest before you buy one, experiment a little bit. But my personal favourite is this one. It's the Olympus 17mm lens. I think it's absolutely fantastic. It's a little bit wider than some people may prefer, and if it is a little bit too wide for you, consider the 20mm Lumix lens. That's another superb lens, the 1.7. Because this is a 1.8, the other one a 1.7, we've got, again, the very fast aperture on this one in comparison to your kit lenses. Gives you great low light capability, allows you, even if you've got something far enough away in the distance, to get something of a pleasing bokeh as well. So it's a very adaptable lens, but it does give you a wonderful viewpoint without too much of that distortion, without too much creating an altered image. Now one of the things I really like about these lenses is if I'm taking full shots of people, if I'm taking full body shots, I find these are really good. The problem with something like a 50mm lens is you have to be that little bit too far away. Now there are advantages and disadvantages to all lenses, and as I've said, for a full body shot I think these are great. If you do something like street photography, you might find that you have to get too close to people to actually get the shot, and it becomes intrusive. So you really need to work out what you're doing for photography. But I'm aiming this video at the more beginner, the ones who've taken the camera, exhausted the zoom lens that they have as standard, and I want to have a little bit something to play with and something different. Now one of the things I said earlier on the video is I find something like this is to be a really good introduction lens to train people in photography. And why is that? Well, whether the 25mm or the 17 or the 20, they're a usable lens because they will do 95% of the shots that you need them to. I find again with the 17mm I'll carry that around all day on the camera without putting anything else on, and I can get most of my shots. But what it does make you do is it makes you move your feet. It makes you start looking at the viewpoint you have, and instead of just zooming in and out and just making the camera fit what you're going to do, it makes you use the camera itself to actually fit in with what the subject is. And we forget that sometimes. Sometimes it's just easy to zoom a lens and take a quick snap. But if you're really wanting to challenge yourself a little bit, take out one of these lenses, refuse to take another lens, take a whole day shooting on it, take as many shots as you can, and work out how you do your composition, work out how you're actually using the lens to its maximum. They are really, really good for that. And as I say, remember, when I first started in photography, 35mm cameras came only with the stock 50mm standard lens, which again, as I say, is equivalent to 25 on these Micro Four Thirds. So we didn't have a choice. We couldn't afford zooms. We had to make the best of that lens, and we got some superb shots because of it. So what about you? Are you a novice photographer looking for your first lens after your kit lens? Are you something more of an experienced photographer, and do you have views on this? Leave your views below, because it helps other people who are entering the skill of photography to further their skill set on. So my conclusion is this one. For Micro Four Thirds, I have two lenses I would recommend. First is either the 17mm Olympus f1.8, and the second would be the 20mm f1.7 Lumix, both of which are going to do fantastic for you. Wouldn't you believe it? As soon as I mentioned the weather, beautiful sunshine before, I take a pause between shots and the heavens absolutely open. It's been hail and a little touch of snow in the last few minutes, and it's gone down from really nice temperatures to almost freezing. There's Cumbria for you. However, we've come into the car and that's given me a chance to have a little bit of a think about what I was saying to you. To me, this has been the ideal lens for me to get. If we're talking about micro four thirds, the 17mm f1.8 Olympus is my favourite lens. It really is insofar as the primes. If we're talking about the Lumix, you could go up to the 20mm f1.7, both of which are slightly wider than the standard lens, the 25mm. A little bit more expensive, but I think well worth it. Well constructed and really nice fast lenses. You could have still go for the 50mm f1.8 from Olympus or f1.7 from Lumix. They are very, very good lenses, but just take into account what I was suggesting about the extra wide sort of view. Whatever it is, if you're shooting full frame, you're shooting probably looking towards a 35 or a 40mm lens. 35 is another stable lens in the full frame sort of size, and another one of my favourites when I used to shoot full frame was the 35mm lens. If you go in APS-C, you're probably looking about the 24 to 28mm lens to give you equivalent slightly wider than standard. But again, try the lens and see which one fits for you best. Now, I hope this video has been really useful to you. If it has been useful, don't forget there's a subscribe button below. Join the list. It's about 4,700 subscribers now, and I'm looking to get more and more subscribers on the channel so that we can bring you good content. Give me a big thumbs up because that really does help YouTube's algorithm spread it to more and more people. And if you have enjoyed this video, there's a PayPal link down below too where you can leave me a cup of coffee or a small donation to the channel to keep it going. It really is appreciated. Whatever your format, whatever you do, whatever lens you do decide to choose, keep on taking your camera out, keep on taking photographs and enjoy your photography. I shall see you next time, now that it's stopped hail and snow. Bye bye.